I thought he just needed time to grow up. But then I found out my own grandson used my credit card, behind my back. He didn't ask. He didn't apologize. He just smiled and posted pictures of a house he said he bought. What he didn't know, I'd already bought it, with his name nowhere on the deed. Let me tell you how it all went down. Before we continue the story, I just want to say thank you for listening. Let me know in the comments where and what time you're listening from. I read them all. Now let's hear the story. I wasn't born yesterday. That's what I told myself as I stared at the credit card statement sitting on my kitchen table, the one with all those strange charges I didn't recognize. It wasn't the amount that bothered me, not at first. 20 here, 40 there. Just enough to fly under the radar. But something about it made the hair on my arms rise. Like when a bird stops singing in the trees and everything goes quiet. I knew someone was trying to be slick. It was a Wednesday. I remember because it was laundry day and the sweet tea pitcher was still half full in the fridge. I had the radio playing old gospel music like always. I sat down with my glasses on and a pencil in my hand, circling the transactions that made no sense. One said Metafuel, another Hype Supply. Names I didn't recognize, stores I had never visited. And I certainly wasn't ordering anything online at 2 in the morning. My name is Margaret Carter. Most people call me Miss Maggie, especially around town. I'm 67 years old and have lived in the same house for nearly 4 decades. It's not fancy, but it's mine. Paid off, brick to roof, and tidy like a pastor's wife on Sunday morning. I worked most of my life as a school administrator. I was the one who kept the books, sorted the payroll, handled the difficult parents, and made sure no money ever went missing. I raised 2 sons and helped raise 3 grandkids. And I can tell when someone is trying to get slick with numbers. The first person I thought about was Jason. My oldest grandson. 23, smart when he wants to be, charming to a fault, and always running after some new idea. When he was in middle school, he sold candy bars out of his backpack until the principal called me in. When he got to college, he dropped out after 2 semesters because, as he put it, the world was moving too fast for lectures. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. I remember smiling and nodding and praying at night that he wouldn't end up on the 6 o'clock news. Jason has always had a little flash in him. Bragged about crypto, about business deals, about a house he was going to buy soon. Said it was a new construction over on Belmore Drive, corner lot, 3 bedrooms, all modern. He told me he had it locked down, just waiting for the financing to come through. Said he was documenting the journey for his followers on TikTok. I nodded and smiled and told him I was proud, but I didn't say much else. But something about those charges on my card. Something about the timing. It felt close to home. Too close. I called the bank. Spoke to a young man named Jordan. He sounded polite, quick. Said he'd freeze the card and send me a new one. When I asked him where the purchases had shipped to, he hesitated for a moment and then said the address was familiar. My address. I thanked him and hung up the phone. The next day I got a text from Jason. Hey Grandma. If the bank calls, just say you approved the stuff. They trippin'. No explanation. No apology. Just instructions. Like I worked for him. I stared at that message for a good minute. Sat down at the table and read it again as if maybe I had misunderstood. But I hadn't. He was telling me to lie. To cover for him. And he didn't even say please. My first instinct was to call his mama. I had half a mind to march down to wherever he was staying and knock some sense into him myself. But I took a breath. Then another. Then I turned off my phone and pulled out my old notebook. The one I kept under the bread machine. The one with passwords and notes and phone numbers written in my best penmanship. I flipped to the page marked OM. That stood for Lydia Moss. My attorney. My friend. The woman who helped me manage my estate after Harold passed away. Lydia never asked too many questions. She always gave me facts straight and clean. And she knew how to move quiet. I called her. Told her everything. The charges. The card. The text. The way Jason had been parading around online talking about some house he was going to buy. I told her how he hadn't asked, hadn't apologized, and hadn't even seemed ashamed. She didn't interrupt. Just listened, and then she said in that steady voice of hers, Maggie, let's handle this smart. Not loud. Smart. She told me we could freeze everything. Flag the fraud. Report it properly. But then she paused and said something that made me sit up straighter. You said he's looking at a house? On Belmore Drive. I said yes. That's the one he kept bragging about. She went quiet for a moment. I have a client who's selling one on that street. A cash buyer could lock it down quick. If you wanted to send a message. I sat there in the quiet, holding the phone to my ear, and something settled in my chest. Not anger. Not revenge. Clarity. That boy needed to learn. Not from yelling. Not from fighting. From silence. From reality. I told Lydia to do it. And I pulled out my checkbook. The next few days moved fast. Lydia sent over papers. I signed. Transferred funds. Put everything in the name of a quiet little LLC she set up for me. Nothing flashy. Just clean and invisible. And all the while Jason kept posting. Posing out front of that half-finished house like he already owned it. Talking about granite countertops and smart fridges and floor-to-ceiling windows. Taylor, his girlfriend, filmed videos in front of the garage and tagged it, "Our Dream Home." I watched every post with a quiet smile. He had no idea. None at all. But he would. Not because I was angry. Because I loved him. And because love, real love, doesn't always feel warm. Sometimes it feels like a locked door and a deed with someone else's name on it. The day after I signed the papers, I made a pound cake. Not because I was celebrating. Just because it helped me think. I sifted the flour slowly, watching it fall like soft rain into the bowl. That's how I like to move, quiet and measured. Not everything needs to be a storm. Sometimes all you need is steady hands and a little heat, and the truth will rise on its own. Jason didn't call that week. But he posted. Or did he post? He shared a video of himself walking through the house with a big grin on his face, pointing at empty corners like he could already see furniture there. "Where the pool table's going," he said, laughing. Taylor followed behind, filming him with her phone and saying things like, "We're so close, y'all. Can't believe we manifested this." The caption said, "Closing soon. Big wins only." I watched it with one hand wrapped around my teacup and the other resting on the deed Lydia had couriered to my front door. He was dreaming out loud for all the world to see. Bragging about a house that didn't belong to him. A house that now legally belonged to me. And I still hadn't told him. Not yet. I didn't want to humiliate him. That's not what this was about. It was about teaching him something the world hadn't. Consequences. I raised that boy better than this. I don't know what the world filled his head with since college. Fast money, fast women, fast fame. But somewhere along the line he forgot who taught him how to hold a spoon, who stayed up with him through the fever that wouldn't break, who took on a second job so his mama could finish nursing school. He forgot. But I hadn't. And now he was going to remember. On Friday afternoon he finally called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey Grandma," he said, too cheerful. "You got a minute?" I said yes. Kept my voice steady. Cool, he said, dragging the words out. "Listen, small thing. My bank's been acting weird. I think there's some fraud alert on my name. Not sure why. I can't access my account." I didn't say anything. And, he added, "The mortgage people hit me with some weird notice. Said my co-signing info came back flagged." Still I said nothing. He laughed nervously. "Anyway, it's probably just a glitch. You know how tech is. But I figured since it was your card that got mixed up before, maybe if you just called the bank and let them know everything's cool, they could speed things up." I waited one long second, then said, "Come by the house tomorrow. We'll talk about it then." He hesitated. "Yeah. Sure. I can do that." I hung up before he could say anything else. That night I didn't sleep much. I laid in bed with my hand resting on my chest, feeling the rhythm of my own heart. It wasn't anger I felt. It was grief. Grief for the version of him I used to know. Grief for the trust he'd trampled. Grief for the part of myself that wondered if this was somehow my fault. But underneath the grief was something stronger. Resolve. The next morning I set out 2 chairs on the porch and made fresh lemonade. It was sunny. Quiet. The kind of morning that made you believe the world could still be good if people just slowed down and listened to each other. He showed up around 11 wearing a t-shirt that said CEO in gold letters and sunglasses he didn't need. I didn't comment on either. I just pointed to the empty chair and said, "Sit." He did, folding his arms across his chest like he was preparing for a scolding. I didn't scold. I asked, "Why didn't you ask?" He blinked. "Ask what?" "Before using my card. Before opening a second one in my name." He shifted. "I was going to tell you. I just needed to get things moving." "That's not what I asked." He didn't answer. So I leaned forward and said, "What you did was theft. And then you lied to cover it. And then you tried to involve me in the lie." He threw his hands up. Hey look, it wasn't that serious. I was going to pay it back. With what money? He paused. You don't have a job, Jason. You've got followers. Not income. And even if you had money, you still didn't ask. He looked away. I didn't think it'd be a big deal. You always say you're fine. I am fine, I said. Because I don't spend what I don't have. He went quiet. I stood up and went inside. Came back with an envelope. Inside was a printout of the deed. The one with my name on it. I handed it to him. What's this? He asked. That house you've been posting about. It's mine. His eyes scanned the page. Then again. Then again. His mouth opened but no words came out. I saw the listing. I knew the seller. I made an offer. In cash. 2 weeks ago. He looked like the wind had been knocked out of him. But why would you do that? I sat back down. Because I needed you to understand something. You think the world owes you things just because you dream about them. But the world doesn't run on dreams, Jason. It runs on trust. You broke that. His jaw clenched. So what, this is punishment? No, I said softly. This is a lesson. One you clearly weren't going to learn any other way. He held the paper like it was a weight he didn't know how to carry. I let the silence stretch. Then I added, you're lucky I still love you. If I didn't, you'd be learning this in court. He swallowed hard. So what happens now? I looked out at the street, then back at him. That depends on you. He didn't say anything for a long time. Just sat there with that piece of paper in his hand, like it had burned through the skin and settled in the bone. He kept looking at the name on the deed, mine, and shaking his head like it would change the longer he stared. I didn't rush him. Sometimes silence teaches louder than shouting. He finally asked without looking up, so you really bought the house? I nodded once. He leaned back and blinked at the sky. That was supposed to be my dream. I told everyone. I filmed everything. I already posted the walkthrough. I sipped my lemonade and said nothing. You could have just told me, Grandma. You didn't have to go behind my back. That made me look up. Behind your back? I asked, raising one eyebrow. You mean like how you used my credit card without permission? Or applied for a new one in my name? He looked like he wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. So instead he ran his hands over his face and muttered, this is a nightmare. No, I said calmly. This is the result of your choices. He stood up and paced the porch like the truth was something he could walk away from. What am I supposed to tell Taylor? My friends? Everybody thinks I own that place. I posted the floor plan. The inspection day. Everything. I looked at him and saw not just the young man he was now, but the boy I used to carry on my hip. The one who used to sneak cookies from the jar and run off giggling. The one who used to fall asleep on my lap during thunderstorms. That boy would have cried and told the truth. But this man in front of me, he was worried about followers. He sat back down hard and dropped his head into his hands. I messed up, he whispered. I really messed up. Now we were getting somewhere. I leaned forward. Yes, you did. He looked up at me, eyes glassy. I didn't think it would snowball like this. I just needed to show people I was doing something with my life. You don't prove your worth by pretending, I said. You prove it by being honest, by keeping your word, by asking, not taking. He shook his head. But people don't care about that. Online you gotta show success or nobody takes you seriously. Then maybe stop living online, I said. Try showing up in the real world instead. That hit him. He sat back and stared at nothing for a while. Then he asked quietly, are you gonna sell it? The house? I asked. He nodded. I haven't decided. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but he didn't. He just kept folding and unfolding the edge of the deed paper, like it was the only thing keeping his hands from shaking. After a moment I added, there's something else you need to know. He looked up again, wary. I reported the fraud. His face dropped. I didn't press charges, I added quickly. But the bank knows. There's a freeze on your accounts until they finish their internal investigation. His shoulders slumped. That means no new credit lines. No account activity. And your score. I shook my head. It'll take years to fix. He whispered, Grandma. I told you, I said. This isn't punishment. This is protection. You don't get to burn the house down and ask for another match. He swallowed and looked down again. I softened my tone. You're still my grandson. I still love you. That hasn't changed. But love doesn't mean covering for you while you dig yourself into a hole. Sometimes love looks like telling the truth to your face and letting you feel every inch of it. We sat in silence again. Then he asked, so what now? What do I do? I looked at him carefully. You start over. You get a job. A real one. You stop pretending. You build something honest. And when you're ready, you come back here and show me that boy I raised. He nodded slowly. Not the kind of nod you give when you're trying to agree, but the kind that means you're finally starting to accept something you've been running from. I can help, I said, but not the way you want. He looked at me again. What do you mean? I bought the house. It's in my name. But it's empty. And it needs someone to maintain it. Yard work. Basic cleaning. Monthly reports. I need someone I can trust. You want me to work for you? He asked. I want you to learn what it takes to earn the things you brag about, I said. He stared at me for a long time. Then for the first time in months he said something I hadn't heard in far too long. I'm sorry. I let that hang between us. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. I reached over and handed him a set of keys. Not to the house. To the mower in my shed. Because he wasn't ready for doors yet. He needed to start with grass. And if he could handle that, maybe just maybe one day I'd hand him something more. But not yet. Not until I knew he could be trusted with more than a pair of sneakers and a dream. I wasn't expecting a miracle. I want to make that clear. I've been around long enough to know a young man doesn't change just because you hand him a rake and a reality check. But I do believe in effort. I believe when people are truly sorry they don't just say it, they show it one day at a time. Jason showed up the next morning at 8 sharp. Hoodie on, baseball cap pulled low, hands in his pockets. Didn't say much, but I could tell he was trying to look less cocky, more humble. I didn't welcome him with hugs or second chances. I handed him a list. Mow the lawn. Clean the gutters. Clear the flower beds. Bag the leaves. He looked at it, nodded once and got to work. No complaints. No eye rolling. Just silence, the kind that lets you know someone's starting to sit with themselves. I watched him from the window like I used to when he was a boy, back when he'd run barefoot through the grass and try to catch lightning bugs in a jar. There was something different in him now. Not broken but slowed. Like maybe, just maybe, something had finally stuck. I made him a sandwich around noon. Ham and cheese on white bread, a little mustard, nothing fancy. Set it on a plate with some chips and brought it out to the porch. I didn't call his name. Just left it on the step and went back inside. He came up 5 minutes later, picked up the plate and said a quiet thank you. It was the first full sentence he'd said that day. He came back the next morning. And the one after that. 3 days in a row. Same routine. Showed up early, worked quiet, ate his lunch, left without lingering. By the end of the first week, I noticed he'd stopped wearing that flashy chain. The one he used to tuck into his shirt like it was subtle, even though it always caught the light just right whenever a camera turned on. Now it was gone and so was the phone in his hand. I didn't see him post a single video. No selfies in front of the house. No hashtags about grinding or manifesting or winning. Just he worked. He swept the walkway, repaired a broken panel in the fence, even scrubbed down the old mailbox with steel wool and a bucket of vinegar I left out. He didn't ask for praise and I didn't offer it. We had an understanding now. He'd broken something between us and this was how he was going to earn back the right to speak on it. Toward the end of the second week he came to the door with a small envelope. Handed it to me like it weighed more than it did. Inside was a folded stack of 20s. $200 in all. It's not everything, he said, eyes down. But it's a start. For the stuff I charged on your card. I looked at it. Then looked at him. It's not about the money, Jason, I said. He nodded. I know. But I want you to have it anyway. I didn't count it. I didn't need to. I just placed it on the counter and asked if he wanted a cup of tea. He said yes. We sat on the porch sipping peach tea in silence. The sun was starting to dip below the trees, casting long shadows across the grass he'd just finished cutting. For a moment it almost felt like old times. He broke the quiet first. I didn't realize how far I'd gone, he said. Until you showed me. I didn't respond. I wanted to hear what came next. I thought if I just looked successful, eventually it would be real. You know, like if I played the part long enough, the world would catch up. I set my teacup down gently. You were trying to plant fruit without ever watering the roots. He blinked at me, then smiled just a little. Yeah. That's exactly it. I turned to him and said, Jason, life's not a highlight reel. You can't skip the work and expect the rewards. That house. It wasn't about the house. It was about the principle. You wanted to build a future with someone else's foundation. That's not how it works. He nodded slowly, like the words were finally reaching a place in him that had been locked up for too long. I want to fix it, he said. I don't know how, not all the way. But I want to. That was the first time he'd said something that sounded less like a speech and more like a decision. Later that evening, after he left, I called Lydia. We hadn't spoken in a few days and she was curious for an update. He's working, I told her. Showing up on time. Earning his meals. She asked, and how's his attitude? Less mouth. More listening. She laughed. That's a good start. Then she said something that made me pause. You know, Maggie, if you're open to it, we can draw up a conditional transfer. Something in writing. Nothing guaranteed, but a path. Something that shows him this isn't about holding power over him. It's about giving him a reason to keep going. I thought about that long after we hung up. I slept on it, prayed on it, and waited for one more sign. It came 2 mornings later. Jason showed up with a bucket of paint, completely unprompted. Said he noticed the back fence was starting to peel and figured it was time it got cleaned up. He didn't ask for money. Didn't even ask for help. Just said he wanted to make something look right again. That was the sign I needed. The next day, I sat him down at the same kitchen table where I'd once found that fraud charge. The same table where his mama had done her homework. The same one his granddaddy had built with his own hands back in 1972. I handed him a manila envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside was a document Lydia had drawn up. A conditional transfer agreement. If he kept showing up. If he worked steadily. If he continued to pay back the debt. If he made it 1 full year without another incident. Then I would hand him the deed. He looked at me wide-eyed. You'd do that for me? I'd do that for the young man I believe you can still become, I said. Not for the one who used my name. For the one who's willing to rebuild his own. He didn't cry. But his hands shook when he folded the paper and tucked it into his jacket. He stood to leave, then turned back toward me. I won't let you down. I gave him a look that made him pause. Don't say it. Show it. Some mornings I still woke up angry. Not loud, shaking angry, just quiet heat in the chest. The kind that sits with you while you're stirring your coffee, reminding you that even the people you love most are still capable of disappointing you. I wasn't mad that Jason had used me. I was mad that he'd thought I wouldn't notice. That's what stung the most. Like I was just some old woman he could reach past without consequence. Like I didn't have eyes. Or memory. Or pride. But then he'd show up. Same time. Every day. Rain or shine. Sometimes even before I was up. He'd be sweeping the porch or trimming the hedges or taking out the trash without being asked. One morning I found him reorganizing my garage. Every shelf labeled. Tools cleaned and oiled. He said he figured it was time I had some order in there again. That's when I knew the boy was serious. Still, I made no promises. That was the rule. You don't earn trust back with 1 good week. Or even 1 good month. You earn it by showing up on the days when no one's clapping. One afternoon, I was flipping through the mail when I noticed an envelope with Jason's handwriting on it. Inside was a receipt. He'd made another payment toward what he owed me. $50 this time, along with a note. I'm still counting. I smiled, folded it carefully, and placed it in the same tin where I kept his first letter. He didn't know I was saving them. Didn't know I'd printed out screenshots of his old apology text, his first bank refund notice, even the first photo he deleted from his TikTok when he stopped bragging about the house. Not for revenge. For record. Because when this was over, he wasn't just going to see what he had taken. He was going to see everything he gave back. Later that week, I got a call from one of my neighbors. Miss Lorene, the one who always has binoculars on her porch like she's running a neighborhood surveillance program. She said, Maggie, I don't mean to be nosy, but your grandson? That boy's been over there every day. I see him sweating like a sinner outside the church. What's he doing? I laughed. He's learning how to grow up. She said, well, he's doing it mighty quiet. I like that. So did I. Still, I hadn't forgotten everything. Just because the hurt wasn't fresh didn't mean it had healed completely. That's when Lydia called. She was checking in, asking how I felt about everything. If I wanted to update the trust documents, schedule a meeting, start moving forward. I told her not yet. Why not? She asked. He's working. He's paying. You've made progress. I stirred my tea. Progress is one thing. Stability is another. You think he might relapse? I don't know what I think, I said. But I know what I'm not ready for. She respected that. A few days later, Jason came to me with an idea. Grandma, he said, I was thinking about flipping the old shed. I raised an eyebrow. Flipping it into what? A workspace. For small projects. Like furniture refinishing, maybe tech repairs. I've been watching videos. I stared at him for a beat, waiting to see if it was another shiny idea or something grounded. Then he said, I figured if I can learn how to mess things up, I can learn how to build something too. That was the right answer. I told him I'd match half the cost. He'd have to earn the rest. The next week he cleared out the entire shed. Cleaned, painted, installed new shelving. He turned it into something real. And he didn't post a single photo. Just worked. He found a job too. Part-time at the hardware store. Nothing glamorous. But I knew from experience, there's nothing more humbling than working near the very tools that fix what you broke. He came home smelling like paint thinner and cedar. I liked it. One day he sat with me on the porch and said, I don't think I want to move into that house right away. Not even if I earn it. I think I want to help fix up the one across the street first. Old Miss Reba's place. Why? I asked. He shrugged. Because it's the right thing. And I owe the street some good work. That night I went into my bedroom, pulled out the trust folder, and placed a sticky note on the front that read, Review with Lydia. He might be ready. Not because he was perfect, but because he was trying when no one was watching. So I didn't tell him. I wanted to see if he kept going without a carrot dangling in front of him. Because the world doesn't always give you a reward when you behave. Sometimes all you get is peace. And peace is enough. One evening, after a long day of work, Jason sat across from me with dirt on his jeans and a band-aid on his knuckle. He handed me another envelope. Inside wasn't money this time. It was a hand-drawn sketch of the house. The one I owned. The one he once tried to take through lies. Only now it had a new coat of paint. A garden in front. His name and mine etched quietly in the corner, not bold, just tucked in like a signature. I wanted to show you what I see now, he said. And for the first time in months I let him hug me. Not because he earned the house, but because he earned a piece of my trust back. And sometimes that's even harder to get. The day came quietly without any grand announcement or balloons or speeches. That's how real change always comes. Soft, steady, almost shy. It was a Friday afternoon. The kind where the heat settles heavy on the porch railings and even the bees seem too tired to buzz. I was sitting in my favorite chair with a glass of sweet tea, watching the street shimmer in the sun, when Jason pulled up in his beat-up old truck. No music blasting. No girlfriend filming. Just him, a duffel bag in the passenger seat, and a small bouquet of flowers clutched awkwardly in his hand. He walked up the steps slow, like he wasn't sure if he belonged. I set my tea down and waited. When he reached the top, he handed me the flowers without a word. I took them, inhaled the faint scent of daisies and sunflowers, and nodded for him to sit. He did. We sat there for a long time, neither one of us rushing the moment. Finally he spoke. I got a promotion. I looked at him sideways. At the hardware store? He smiled. Yeah. Floor supervisor. Better hours. A little raise. I nodded, sipping my tea. That's good. He rubbed his hands together nervously. And I finished paying off the last of what I owed you. I nodded again. Still calm. Still measured. I know, I said. I counted every dollar. He smiled at that, a real smile, not the forced kind he used to wear like armor. And, he added, voice dropping to something almost vulnerable, I enrolled in night classes. Business management. Figured if I'm gonna build something, I ought to know how to run it right. That surprised me. Not because he wasn't smart enough. He always had been. But because it was the first time he talked about building without flashing it to the world first. I reached under my chair and pulled out a small folder. He looked at it, confused. I held it out. He took it slowly, hands trembling just a little. Inside was the deed to the house. Signed. Notarized. Final. His name printed clean and proud on the line next to mine. His eyes widened as he read it. He looked up at me like he couldn't quite believe it was real. Grandma. I raised a hand to stop him. This isn't a gift, I said. This is a responsibility. He nodded quickly, blinking fast. You earned it, I said. Piece by piece. Day by day. Not with money. With effort. With respect. He swallowed hard. I'm not giving it to the boy who stole from me. I'm giving it to the man who made it right. He set the folder carefully on the porch table like it was made of glass and leaned forward. I'm never gonna forget this, he said. Never. You better not, I said, smiling gently. He chuckled, wiping at his eyes with the heel of his hand. We sat there a while longer, watching the sun start to sink behind the rooftops. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic. It was just good. Later, after he left, I stood on the porch alone and looked down the street. Neighbors were starting to put up fall decorations. Little kids were riding bikes with training wheels. Someone's grill was smoking 3 houses down. Life moving on. And in the middle of all that ordinary beauty stood my grandson's house. Our house. Not just a symbol of what was taken but of what was rebuilt. He didn't move in right away. Said he wanted to save up for furniture. Wanted to fix the place up right before showing it off. Said he wasn't rushing anymore. Good. Neither was I. Because some things, the best things, aren't supposed to come easy. They're supposed to come slow and hard and honest. That house would stand a long time. Longer than the likes and the followers and the fake friends. Longer than the shame. Longer than the anger. It would stand as a reminder of a boy who learned the difference between pretending to win and truly earning something that mattered. And of a grandmother who loved him enough to let him fall, and loved him even more to make sure he learned how to stand back up on his own. One evening a few weeks later, Jason came by with a key. He handed it to me with a grin. Spare key, he said. For emergencies. And Sunday dinners. I laughed, tucked it into my apron pocket and hugged him tight. It was the first time in a long while I hugged him without reservation, without that little tremor of hurt lingering between us. He wasn't the boy I raised anymore. He was something better. A man who knew the value of trust, of hard work, of family. And if he ever forgot again, well, he knew where to find me. Right here. On this porch. With a pitcher of sweet tea. And a heart that was always willing to start over. As long as he remembered how to knock on the door first.